I did the core training last fall and spring with the Somatica Institute. So I am trained with them to be an intimacy coach, or it can also be called a sex and relationship coach. Um, and one thing I did before this, Terry, was I listened to the first podcast where you interviewed me just to remind myself of where I was then. And I loved hearing there was a lot of mentioning of intimacy and connection in that first podcast. And that is where I think maybe my foundation is. And that is what I am really cherishing and enjoying about my personal journey is big into intimacy and connection, starting with intimacy and connection with myself.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. You're listening to episode 158 of the Sober Edge podcast. Today, I want to introduce and reintroduce my friend, Aimee Ames, who was a guest on the podcast in the very beginning. And Aimee and I have a shared background. We both went to the Nutritional Therapy Association to become functional nutritionists. And then our paths have diverged a bit. And so it's so amazing to be able to share the work that Aimee is now doing with all of you. Aimee is a multifaceted coach weaving together her years of lived experience with her training in breathwork, intimacy, and relationship coaching, and functional nutrition. She especially loves supporting other midlife women who have experienced or are ready for a sexual awakening, as well as those transitioning after the end of a long-term relationship. Aimee has a practice outside of San Francisco in the East Bay and sees coaching clients on Zoom. You can find out more with the link in the show notes, and I know you're going to really enjoy this episode. We dive into breathwork, we talk about her intimacy coaching, and we talk about real life. Enjoy. Well, hey, everyone. It's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And I get to welcome back my friend, Aimee Ames. And she was on the podcast in the early days. So I will link the show notes to episode 10, where Aimee and I had our first conversation. And Aimee, like all amazing business owners and entrepreneurs, we evolve based on kind of our own personal journey. So you have moved from where I met you as a functional nutritionist, kind of working with moms in the kitchen, into a lot of different modalities and areas where you now really support women in kind of their own journey back to themselves. Is that kind of a fair thing to say?
It is. It is. I love that, back to themselves, because I have found, I just turned 50 this year, and I found in my mid 40s that with 3 kids and a really long-term marriage that I had put myself on the back burner and maybe even never took the time to get to know myself. I met my husband when I was 20. We started dating so young. So a lot of my early life decisions were made in partnership with him. And I'm now 4 years divorced, very amicably. We are great co-parents, navigating a new relationship there. But now I've had this opportunity to get reacquainted with myself and kind of remember who I am. And I love supporting. I see this all the time with midlife women, that we have abandoned ourselves in some way for caretaking for other people. And when we come back to ourselves and remember who we are, we can lead such a more fulfilling life for ourselves. And then we also have so much more to offer those that are in our lives, because we are coming from a more grounded, happy place.
That's beautiful. I agree. And one thing you say, I'll just ask kind of from a personal perspective, but also
for my audience, if you're in a long-term relationship, it feels like some of this work feels like singular, like it's a solo endeavor. So how do you navigate that if you're in a long-term partnership and, taking time for yourself or sort of changing that dynamic as you're married? My husband and I have been married for 42 years.
Mm. Okay, first of all, congratulations. That is something to be celebrated. And yeah, that's a fantastic question because I felt like I was starting to change when I was married and that there wasn't really space for that within the relationship. Um, and and since then I have met many couples who have figured out how to grow together. And, sometimes one is growing one way, one is growing another way, but you can come together and complement each other, if you will. I think a big part is just honoring the individuation of each other within the relationship. Something I've learned recently in one of my newer trainings is that in every great relationship, there's a need for healthy attachment and healthy individuation. So sometimes if the attachment is too heavy, the individuation can get really challenging. Whereas when we honor that your partner, you really want your partner to be the most, you know, the most, the best version of themselves as they want to be and can be and are capable of, and you can support that as a partner. That's a beautiful thing. It can be tricky along the way though, because I'm sure there are many fears of, if someone changes too much, are they still going to be happy in this relationship? And yeah, so it can be a really tricky thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as you were speaking, I love that explanation and that opening into the idea that it is an inward journey, and that takes some security within that relationship so that we can allow ourselves to grow. And I think I kind of forced my change on my husband when I stopped drinking alcohol. It's been almost 9 years now, and that was a big shift in our relationship. It was one of the ways that we connected. It was a big part of our social life, and I didn't realize at the time, but it opened me up to a lot of self growth and a lot of exploration that meant that I ended up on the other side of not drinking, a very different person. And I do agree that sometimes that can be a place of fear. I think that sometimes partners feel like their partner is going to outgrow them or they're
Mhm.
looking for something different. And I remember early on in my journey that I shared with my husband, like, I'm not doing this as an exit plan for our marriage.
Mm,
I'm just doing this to serve, who I am on the inside, what is best for me. And hopefully that was reassuring to him. And sometimes I'll offer that to my own clients that that can be a place of just, honoring that they might have some concerns. I use the example if you are a woman who's on an alcohol-free journey and you're noticing changes, or you're a woman who's on an empowerment journey, an embodiment journey to understand more about yourself, and you are changing, and your husband is challenged by that. Imagine if he, started going to the gym, hired a personal trainer, was working out 5 days a week, changed his diet, and joined a running club. You'd be like, is he trying to tell me something? So I think communication is always so key.
yes, definitely.
Yeah. And so you have added breath work as one of the modalities that you serve your clients, and also intimacy coaching as a Somatica practitioner in training. So I love all of that. I think it's so powerful. And I've had so much fun watching you. And you've seen, me try out new things and change my focus and move in different directions. And that is one of the things that's so beautiful when we start on this wellness journey. And as wellness professionals, we can start to explore and then offer the things that really resonate with us. So, Aimee, what was it that drew you to breathwork?
That is everything you just said. Yes, I agree with. Well, what drew me to breathwork was in March of 2020, right before the pandemic shut everything down, I went to my first breathwork session, but it was not at all what I was expecting. It was with a sound bath from a woman who I knew. I had been to many of her sound baths, loved her, and I never heard of breathwork as an official modality. I just thought, oh, we're going to be breathing, calmly and relaxing with the sound bath. Great. I signed up. I went. We started in a circle, and the woman facilitating the breath work started explaining what could possibly happen during our time. And I I was partly listening, partly not. And I just remember thinking, like, wait, what? Really? That what? Like, people might cry, people might laugh. And I was a little confused. And so we started it. And sure enough, within like 10 minutes, there was crying in the room and all kinds of emotional expression. And I accessed certain things that I had no idea I could access through my breath. I was a little like in uncharted territory. I wasn't quite sure what was going on because, like I said, I had never done this before. I didn't know what I was signing up for. But it was also at a time when I was starting this path of increased self-development, of a spiritual awakening, if you will, where I was going deeper into myself. And I recognized after that, and I to this day, I don't remember exactly what happened during the session, but I remember thinking that I like lifted up a really heavy trap door and had access to something really deep within me. And I was like, I can't put that trap door back down now that I know what's in there. But then COVID came. I couldn't go back to breath work for a while. So I don't want to say I forgot about it, but I didn't do anything about it for a while. And then about a year and a half later, I was in a predicament where I was feeling really stuck and I needed some clarity about a situation. The same two people were offering breath work in a sound bath. And I thought, oh, I'm going to go and see if this will help me to get unstuck. And sure enough, I went with the intention of what do I do next? Where do I go from here? And I had this vision during my session because you can reach an altered state of consciousness. You can have these visions. And I had a vision that kind of spelled out for me, this is what happened and this is where you should go next. This is your next step. And it was very reassuring. It was very calming. And I just sort of surrendered and appreciated the message. And then I recognized that I loved breath work, that it was so powerful, and that I wanted to learn how to facilitate it. And so then a few months later, I started my program to facilitate. And that was about 2.5 years ago. So I've been doing it for about 2.5 years now.
Wow. And you and I were talking before. I have been fascinated by breath work for a while now. And there are a lot of different options to when we say breath work, like it encompasses a lot. And there's different parts of breath work that people can specialize in. And so when you talk about this altered state of consciousness, that's a different style of breath work than like breathing to relax your nervous system or doing the alternate nasal breathing, for example. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Right. Yes, we have just different ways of breathing to regulate our nervous system that you can do, throughout your day. And then this is definitely more in depth. And there are different types of this breath work. So some of your listeners maybe have heard of holotropic breath work. That one can be a little more intense physically. I tend to think of it as being very gentle. I feel that in these healing modalities, it doesn't have to be hard and painful, that it can be gentle. I think just the variety of breath work. So I have been in some, so I go to all different kinds so that I can learn and compare, if you will. Um, some people have 30, 40 people in a room that are laying down because you lay down on a yoga mat or another mat, you have a blanket on you, you wear an eye mask, and then there is music that is choreographed to sort of the emotional or potential emotional arc of the session. And different things happen for different people. And even for the same person, different things happen every time you come because you show up differently. But you start you start breathing. It's called the circular birthing breath, where you breathe in and out of your mouth, pulling the inhale and then just letting the exhale fall. And you do that for about 30 minutes, which sounds like a very long time, but within just a few moments, things start shifting in your body. So you have energy that is moving around. You have some physical sensations that you might feel. You might feel a tingling. Some people feel eventually like they're floating a little bit. Some people might feel energy going to any physical ailments they might have, because it can be a physical healing modality. It can also be an emotional or spiritual healing technique, if you will. And often there's an emotional component to it. Like I said, you might have a vision. Basically, you might process something that you weren't ready to process when it happened. Maybe something traumatic, maybe just something really emotional. You might be able to express those emotions now and get them out of your body so that your body doesn't hold on to them. So often there are tears. And we don't always know why. Sometimes they are happy tears. I know when I'm in breathwork sessions, I'm often just overwhelmed with whatever emotion it is, and I have to get it out of me somehow. And that's usually through tears. I've had people who laugh a little bit. I've had people who've let out some screams. And then there's also some people have done a lot of physical movement where their bodies need to somatically just release something.
Wow.
There's
Yeah. So you've talked about it as gentle. You've talked about it as sort of healing. So what are people's kind of experiences when they come out of like a single session? What might someone expect?
So, and then to finish up what a session looks like before going there is that you are for about 30 minutes doing the pulling of the breath. And then for about 20 or 30 minutes, you relax your breathing. The music kind of mellows out a little bit and you just experience whatever's happening. It could be physical or emotional. And then most people, when they come out of it, I always ask them to share one word of how they're feeling in that moment. And it's usually something like grateful, inspired, grounded, calm. It's an array, but it's most always something quite positive and profound, regardless of what has happened in the session. It could be an intense emotional release, but by the end, it's like, okay, that got out of me, and now I'm feeling really great.
And what is the mechanism behind that? Like, why does it work?
I appreciate that you asked me that. And here's what I'm going to say. There are physical, scientific reasons behind, if that's what you're asking, about what happens in your brain, about the oxygen, like you're oxygenating your blood. There are also different theories about it. So I don't know if anything is like 100% proven this is what happens. I, however, choose to believe, like I'm not really a sciencey person. I choose to believe in kind of the mystery of it. Of I don't really need to know what's happening. I just really enjoy what I get from it. And it feels really good and it's helping me in all of it. So for example, one breathwork session I had early on, speaking of back to relationships and long-term marriages and alcohol, that was one thing that kind of led me, one of the many things that led to divorce in my marriage was that I changed my relationship with alcohol, but my husband wasn't ready to do that. And one of my breathwork sessions after we separated was this abundant love that I have for him. You know, he was my best friend for 26 years. And I had this clear sense of he is on his path. I'm on mine. He may never change. He might stay on the exact same path the rest of his life, and that's okay. I will still, this was exact, like the words in my session was, I will still hold him and love him regardless. And so in that session, I released so much anger, resentment, frustration, and I just embraced it with love and acceptance.
Yeah, and released control, like wanting to control the situation, right?
Thank you. Yes,
Feel
that's a
that.
huge one.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, no, I love that you shared that. It is complicated about what's happening. You and I talked about the book Breath by James
Mhm.
Nestor, where he does talk about the science and the neuroscience. And we see that breath work is something that the ancients also used. Lots of studies have come into our modern culture around how breath work actually the mechanism of it. And I believe that what James talks about in the book is that part of it is the extra CO2. Like we think that, it's not good to have the carbon dioxide in our bloodstream, but actually we find that according to some of these scientific studies and the results, that is part of what's changing how our organs are responding to our breath. And so to me, what is the mystery of it, Aimee, is that we have this mechanism that we use, but we use it so ineffectively. And we've lost the art of how we can use breath control to achieve better health, better uh, wellness, and even more of understanding from an emotional component.
Mhm.
And I find it all so fascinating. So I think there is science, certainly, but there is also this beautiful mystery of how we heal from the inside out. And we don't necessarily need pharmaceutical drugs and other types of interventions, but our body is always trying to heal itself.
Mhm.
And I think you and I, that was one thing that I really learned in the nutritional therapy course that you and I did, is that, wow, I didn't realize that my body had such an innate ability to heal. And I think this is part of that as well. Would you agree?
I would definitely agree. Yes, the book, The Body Keeps the Score, like we hold on to ourselves, hold on to trauma and experiences that we have not processed and we have not released. And I've seen that breath work is definitely a modality to help with that. Um, there were two things that I wanted to mention. One, when you said a sober modality. So this breath work has been around for a really long time in many different cultures. But in America in the 60s or 70s, when Stan Groff was learning about and studying the positive effects of using LSD for psychological purposes, and then it got shut down because people started using it recreationally. And now, or then he wanted to find something that could elicit a similar response in your body. And he found that breath work could potentially do this. So you can reach an altered state of consciousness that can be similar to some psychedelic experiences with breath work. Not always, there is no guarantee. But that is something that I love about it too, is that it's a sober modality that you can come and have a 2-hour session and drive yourself home after and feel great.
Yeah, yeah, it's so fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that it points to why you should go into this with a healthy respect for the modality and with a trained professional.
Yes, that was something worth mentioning too, is that there are a lot of online offerings. And I tried one of those in my training because we were encouraged to try all different kinds. And honestly, I found it a little, and maybe this isn't true for all of them, but the one that I tried, I found that it to be a little irresponsible because there is such integrity in this work. I only do it in person. I do not do it online. Um, And you really need, like, a lot can be unearthed and uncovered, and you really need to have that safety and security of somebody experienced that's holding the space for you to make sure that you are okay and safe, not only during the session, but after the session with whatever may have come up for you.
Yeah. And you are also currently doing some additional somatic training. Would you consider breath work a part of somatic modalities?
Definitely, definitely. I think this was the second thing I was going to say. I had one client who came in and has had rheumatoid arthritis since her 20s, and she was in her 50s, I believe. And in her very first session, I had never seen somebody like so open to receiving breath work, if you will. And in her very first session, she was kicking her legs and moving her arms and her shoulders a lot. And I got the sense that her body had been holding on to so much for so long, and it was showing up as rheumatoid arthritis. But in this session, she was able to move some of it and clear it out. And she told me, she came for a few sessions and she told me that her symptoms were pretty much gone for days after her sessions. So yes, it is a somatic experience. It can be. It can be.
Yes, and that was one of the things in the work that James Nestor highlights in his book is the idea that people, particularly from autoimmune diseases, are finding a great relief because if we think about an autoimmune disease has its roots in kind of the energy being stuck. And
Mhm.
so this is such a beautiful opportunity. And again, something that is available to all of us because we have our breath to work with. So let's dive in a little bit, Aimee, to your newest training. You are learning to be an intimacy coach, and you are still, figuring out what that will look like eventually. You were telling me before, but I noticed that you've been offering some workshops for women to start to get in touch with their own version of, sexual and sensual pleasure. And so just even experiencing like the gift of touch. I often will remind my clients, like, if there's no one around to give you a hug, like, you can do some self-soothing and some touch. That's not necessarily sexual, but that can bring a sense of safety and a sense of peace. And so I'm fascinated by what you're learning and what you're bringing into your practice.
Yeah. So I've been doing a training. I did the core training last fall and spring with the Somatica Institute. So I am trained with them to be an intimacy coach, or it can also be called a sex and relationship coach. Um, and one thing I did before our before this, Terry, was I listened to the first podcast where you interviewed me just to remind myself of where I was then. And I loved hearing there was a lot of mentioning of intimacy and connection in that first podcast. And that is where I think maybe my foundation is. And that is what I am really cherishing and enjoying about my personal journey is big into intimacy and connection, starting with intimacy and connection with myself, right? And that's what started a few years ago. And living alcohol free really, really helped that and supported that journey of knowing who I am and being more connected to myself. And now with this intimacy coaching, it's really, so it is a somatic based method that I'm being taught, where in sessions with clients, and yes, I'm doing some workshops also where we do these similar things, where it's like a relationship lab and you get to practice skills that you might have in a relationship, where I get to show up. I love this, that I get to show up as me, as a coach. I don't, like in talk therapy, therapists cannot really share about themselves. There are boundaries there. But in this coaching, we can both show up completely as ourselves, and we can create a relationship. And it's not a phony relationship. Like, I have feelings about my clients There are boundaries, however, and we get to practice skills, whether they are verbal communication skills or practice any kind of even touch like you're talking about. And whether it's practicing or getting somebody used to it or comfortable with it. Like I have a client now who hasn't dated since he divorced about 8 years ago. And so we just introduced a little bit of touch because, like you said, physical touch is so important for our nervous system, for our general happiness and well-being, and for our health. And so I always at the end, like, give him a really extra long hug because I think that might be the only hug he gets all week.
Mm-hmm.
And just showing him things. This is kind of my motto with this coaching is helping you to learn what's possible. And then you get to decide what you want to do with it. So some of the workshops I've offered for women, the first one was the art of receiving. And so we did some things. We had conversations around what it's like for women to receive, which is actually in our feminine energy, is to be the receiver. But in our society, we do so much giving that it's often really hard for us to receive, whether it's receiving gifts, receiving compliments. How often do women, when somebody's given a compliment, do they negate it and say something else rather than just accept it and receive it? And then also with, with sex and intimacy, that often we as women have been taught or conditioned to believe that maybe our partner's pleasure is more important than our own. And so we give a lot more than we receive. So, learning how to receive, that workshop was really successful. And it really was, it was nice to see that, yes, the women who were there were really, it resonated with them a lot.
Mm. I love that. And I'm so glad that there's Aimees in the world who do this work. Because I don't know if Terry is ever going to do this type. But I think it's a powerful through line for the work that, certainly I started when I stopped drinking alcohol. It was kind of that first journey back to myself. And so I think, learning to be more open and ask for what we need. And that dynamic in any relationship of give and receive has been skewed, like you said, through cultural conditioning or our own circumstances. And certainly when it comes to midlife, we find that there's a shift there as well. We might suddenly be doing more caretaking. We might have a spouse who has an illness, or we're caretaking our elderly parents. We might have less intimacy because our children grow up and move away. And certainly when we think about women divorcing later in life, like I wouldn't consider you probably a gray area, a gray divorce, but, we think gray divorce is probably, men and women in their 50s, 60s and beyond. And so sometimes they do lose that ability to have that physical connection. And so I remember even just thinking like, for some of the shut-ins in my own family, elderly sister-in-laws and such, like, go get a pedicure, go get a massage so that you are experiencing physical touch, that you are experiencing pleasure. It doesn't have to be sexual pleasure, but that intimate physical touch is a key part of staying open and connected to ourself.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I have learned there are other types of workshops, if you will, and groups that provide these safe spaces for people with physical that want and desire physical touch. I went to, actually, a colleague of mine offers what she calls cuddle puddles, that are platonic cuddle puddles, where I haven't been to one of hers, but I know she establishes safety and boundaries, and you only do and accept what you are comfortable with, and that's a whole nother layer of knowing yourself, of what are your boundaries. But I went to a workshop last fall that I forget what it was called, but it was actually interesting. I walked in and I expected a larger group. I expected a mix of genders, and I was the only woman, and there were 6 men there. And I thought, at first I was a little intimidated. And then I thought, wow, what a beautiful gift for me. Like, how lucky am I that I'm in this workshop and I'm the only woman other than the facilitator. But towards the end of it was a 3-hour workshop. And at the end, everybody had the opportunity to ask for something that they wanted or needed. And then all of us had the opportunity to either say yes or no, depending on, if it was within our boundaries. And so, like, I remember one man, it was he sat on the floor cross-legged, and he wanted everybody to come and just give him a hug from behind, hug him and hold him for a little bit from behind, because he recognized that in doing that, he could totally surrender to receiving the hug, that he didn't have to worry about giving anything back, and that was what he needed in that moment. And it was such a beautiful workshop to have these people, it was not sexually charged. It was platonic. It was, how can we care for our fellow humans, and what is it that we need to feel cared for? And some of it was physical touch and some of it was not, but it's that type of safe setting and environment that I would like to create with clients and have activities like that, because I have a lot of friends who are single who really want and need touch. And I would love to find a setting where they are comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And again, I'll say, this is not something, if you're interested in this, maybe don't do it alone, but go to somebody who is a facilitator and has
Mhm.
expertise and training and does create this safe space, because we do want to have the ability to give and receive, but in a place where we feel that safety.
Yes.
So I love how all of this is woven together in, your own journey and what you're now offering for clients. You also, last year, I think might have been your first one, but you're getting ready to offer your second in-person retreat. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, I did. I had my first retreat last September, and it was really, really special and beautiful. And there were 13 women there total. And yes, it was amazing. And this year I've decided I'm kind of going with this theme of the intimate breath, sort of combining both skill sets, the intimacy coaching and breath work. And that's the name of this retreat, because I am really liking smaller groups. It's going to be 6 women, smaller groups where you really have an impact on each other, where there's enough time and space for you to be seen and heard. And we can create these little relationships within it. So yes, in October, I'm having a retreat up in Mount Shasta, at a gorgeous private estate, if you will. And there are a few spots left. If there's anybody listening who's around Northern California and would like more information, I'd love to share it.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I think that we need and deserve this opportunity to do this inner work in a curated space and with intention. I
Yes.
think about the girls' weekend, and I never really. I think I was at the generation ahead of where those were a thing, but often they could devolve into drinking or just a wine session, whining
Yeah.
or bitch session. I hate to use that term because but anyway, just devolve into something that isn't with intention. And there's so much beauty when we set forth with the right intention of what is available to us. And I think it just restores our faith in humanity. Like, oh, there are other lovely humans out there when I am more open to making these connections. And it does take, time and resources and energy, but so worth it.
It is. It really is. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed about facilitating breath work, is that I have seen, again, I do these smaller groups from 4 to sometimes even 2 people up to 8 or 10. And when the women from my community come in, they don't always know each other on that level, on that sort of spiritual, emotional, deeper level. And that in itself has been a really kind of profound shift for some of these women that, okay, I'm not the only one here. There are these other women who are on a similar path. And that's been really beautiful to see and to help support and bring them together.
Mm. Yes, that we are all multi-dimensional for sure. And so, Aimee, in talking to you, I realized that my listeners might think like, wow, Aimee is like, she just lives in this spiritual realm and this bubble, but you're actually like a real human with the challenges that we have in midlife. And you and I were talking about too much sugar in our diets. I mean, real life, children entering their senior year of high school. And so how do you stay in that flow, that beautiful place of allowing the spiritual impact that this work has on you to show up in your day-to-day life?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I do. Yes, I have 3 kids. My oldest is in her second year of college, and then my 2 youngest are seniors. But I also have had them every other week for the past 3 or so years, which I do recognize has gifted me with more space for myself. It's, bittersweet. That means I don't have my kids all the time, but it also means that I do have more time to commit to myself. So I definitely have daily practices that in the morning, I will do a meditation, or I will just sit outside. I have this beautiful place under trees, and sometimes I feel like I'm not doing anything, but I'm just allowing myself to be. I'm connecting with myself. I'm noticing what's going on around me. I'm breathing, and in that time, often things come to me, messages, inspiration, connecting dots if I'm integrating something. Um, and that's a big one, is just having time for myself and being intentional with it.
Yes, yes. And I think that, so many women that you and I both serve are just kind of caught in that place of going through the motions, particularly if we're working with women that have smaller children. It's like, oh, I remember those days when there just is, it's all kind of about the making life work. you know the
Right.
lunches, the school notes, the laundry, the shopping, the oh my goodness. So for women that are wanting to experience more internal connection, what is one or two small things that you would offer that they could start with?
One thing that came to mind, and I am learning with, like I've mentioned, my menopause brain, I need to share it before it leaves my mind, because this might not answer, it might not be for their own journey, but just in general, gratitude, practicing gratitude. It has been proven that just makes you a happier person. So I know one thing I did in my very beginning was I used the 5-minute journal every morning and every night. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's literally 5 minutes a day. They ask you, 3 things you're grateful for. You do it first thing when you wake up. You write some kind of a positive mantra. And then at the end of the day, you write something. I don't remember exactly, but I remember that made a huge impact on me. And that's in 5 minutes a day. Um, Another thing I would say is just bringing awareness, just tracking yourself, bringing awareness to your choices, and without judgment, with curiosity. So, for those women and moms who are so full in their schedule and have a lot of stress and don't have a lot of time for themselves, when you do have time, how are you spending it? What are you choosing to do? And I understand the oh, I just want to flop on the couch and watch Bridgerton or something else. I do that too. I do that a lot. But just the awareness of what your choice is and why, and if that's the best thing for you. And some nights, Bridgerton is the absolute best thing for you. And other nights, it might be a quiet bath. but just that awareness and compassion and grace and curiosity without judgment.
Yeah, I love that. Curiosity is one of my grounding words. And I would also add, explore a simple breathwork session. Your sessions are a couple of hours, like gift yourself with something that might help you discern what area I want to pay attention to more as we go through this place, because life is dynamic. We're not going to be in the same place tomorrow or in a year from now. And those little ones that are taking all our time and energy are going to grow up, and we are going to be left with us. And so I always remind people that no matter what journey you're on, the person that's going to be with you at the end is you.
Yes. Yeah. You are your true life partner.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
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 That might have to be the name of the episode, Aimee.
Ooh.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of the work that you've been doing in the world and just helping us get excited about the possibility of trying some new modalities to explore more of the way that we're wired, understand more of what is available to us as we learn to receive and give and embody that beautiful place of curiosity without judgment, and really be more open to what is ahead. I think that for me, I always hope to leave people with a sense of possibility, um, and opportunity versus you should do this, or there is, any of the can'ts. I think that life can be a beautiful adventure with the right focus.
Mhm. Yeah. May I share one little story as the closing? Um, because this was so inspirational for me. And I know I'm at a time in my life now where, yeah, I have 1 year and then empty nest, and it's bittersweet. There is some nervousness and apprehension, and then there's also a lot of excitement. So when I was separating and we were selling our house, I was cleaning out my closet, or packing up my closet and cleaning it. And I found this turquoise pencil that I had never before in my life seen. And it was in my closet. And I looked at it and it said on the pencil, endless possibilities. And I just, first of all, I couldn't believe it. This was totally a sign for me and what was next for me. And so that has been my motto. It's back in my closet. It has a very special place, and I see it every day, that life is endless possibilities. And if you do try something new, you know, just take yourself out, do something daring, do something brave, do something different. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So there are
There's
endless
endless
possibilities.
possibilities.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Oh, so good. So good. It's always so fun to catch up with you, my friend, and to hear your beautiful philosophy of life and the work that we get to do as women in this world, and as a mother and a wellness professional and just a beautiful human. I thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you so much.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.